Hello, everybody. My name is Gadi Solotorevsky. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. The session today, the first part of the session, I will interview Nurlan regarding the adoption of machine learning techniques for fraud management, their experience in Rogers. And then we will move to a panel discussion and when we speak about what is happening in business assurance and what will happen in business assurance. So let's start. And Nurlan, I know that, Rogers and you have been working with FraudView from CVidya Amdocs using the traditional engines, the statistical engines, the rule-based engines for years. And then you decided that you want something more, that you want also to try the machine learning engine. Why?
So fraud is evolving and it's becoming more sophisticated. Like 10, 15 years ago, we used cell phones just to make calls. But now it's a mini computer in your pocket, and it makes more susceptible for fraud, and it is an interesting piece of hardware for fraudsters. And at the same time, fraud management system, FMS, and FraudView in this case, is fairly old concept. I think it's more than 20 years is in place. And it is somewhat reactive, right? So we need to know about the event is happening, build a rule, and try to catch it. Where we thought that machine learning may help us to cover our blind spots, to make sure that we are more proactive. And at the same time, with the COVID situation, we see that our customers are getting more and more phishing attempts, and more and more transactions are pushed to digital channels. So where fraudsters have more time, more opportunity to figure out our loopholes and try to exploit them. And unfortunately, some customers are giving away their information, means that fraudsters have access to customer information, customer credentials through digital channels, and we thought that it's going to be really hard to combat this with traditional rule-based solutions, with statistics, with analytics. Therefore, we decided that machine learning is a way that we want to approach this.
Okay, and at the time when you started to do it, not many companies were doing machine learning for fraud detection back then, and it was a kind of bet. Will it work or not for you? And what were your expectations? What you thought that it will happen? And you mentioned also COVID-19, and COVID-19 is a situation in which the behavior of the people changed. Was machine learning able to couple with it?
So you hear this word machine learning, AI a lot, but you don't really know what that means for you, right? So it is this concept that it will solve everything, and so our expectation was that we wanted to have supervised and unsupervised models, where we can move some of our rule-based engine to supervised models, and the unsupervised model is going to be our blind spot to cover our blind spot and flag suspicious behavior for us. And I completely agree that COVID-19 changed behavior of customers. Now we have less face-to-face interaction, less people going to the retail store. Instead, they all using the digital channels. And as I mentioned before, it makes for the fraudster much easier to access customers' information, customers' credential through the digital channels, and try to order many hardwares. And especially nowadays, the price of value of the hardware going up all the time. Now we're talking about the hardware that is almost $2,000, and they have very good resale market for that. And machine learning actually helps us to combat those behavior. And I can't imagine with a traditional rule-based approach, we would be able to detect all this fraud that we're having.
Okay, really interesting. Not all the companies have already implemented machine learning for fraud detection. And one of the questions that people ask me a lot is how much time it will take to implement it. It is a project of years, months. What is your experience? Is it something incremental? How it works?
So implementation itself, to have the feature of the machine learning in our fraud management system is not complicated. It's fairly straightforward, and it's taken care of by IT people, by Amdocs. The challenging part for us is to make sure that it yields the result that we want to see. And when I say this, I mean, to have all this data, all this information that supervised and unsupervised models are learning, giving us result. And also we had to change our mindset a little bit, because rule-based engines are somewhat real-time, but the machine learning is not that real-time. You need to make sure that the decision that you're making, you will see result in a few days, in a week, right? And you need to go back and try to understand what is happening. It's kind of new thing that you need to change your mindset, and you need to adopt your fraud rules around it. But going back to your question, the implementation part is not hard. Just the fine-tuning it to make sure that it gives you the result that you want to see is fairly challenging, and it takes a little bit of more time.
Okay. And for what types of fraud are you using machine learning? For all the types of fraud, some types of fraud? Are you using it instead of the rules or on top of the rules? How it's happening?
So definitely we're using that on top of the rules, because we wanted this smooth transition between machine learning and rule-based engine. We just didn't want to, switch overnight. We have three main types of fraud that we use our machine learning. The first one is subscription fraud. The second one is account takeover. And third one is that first-party fraud. And you can argue that first-party fraud is not a real fraud, but we can see this behavior where customers come, they use their legit information without any intention pay. At the end, then we can see that the model helps us a lot to flag this behavior way before that, it's going to be too late. It's on top of other rules, and it really gives us good result. And we didn't want to make it complicated from the get-go. We decided to start simple with 3-4 known fraud types, then kind of build on it.
Okay, and what are the types of fraud that you are planning to detect in the future with it? Are you going to settle to these three types of fraud, or are you planning to expand it?
We will definitely extend it, because we see the good result coming from machine learning, especially as I mentioned before. It helps us to cover our blind spot. It helps us to flag behavior that we're not aware, and we will probably catch it at some point and build rule-based engines around that, but it's going to be too late. So it's really helping us with that approach, and we will definitely extend it to other fraud types.
Interesting. And one of the questions, because I'm sure that we have in the audience operators that are thinking, should I implement machine learning? How to do it? So if somebody came to you, is not implementing machine learning for fraud, what would be your recommendations for that person?
Yeah, it's really hard to recommend to all service providers how to deal with this, because it's all different, all unique, and there is no universal recipe for this. But if you ask my opinion, what I would advise, I will have probably two advices. The first one is going to be know where your data is. No tables, no data itself, volumes, your retention period, how long you store that data, and all that. And the second thing is going to be know your data. So know what that data means, know what kind of other information is available to you that you can use in the machine learning, and you may fine tune it, and you can get the result that you want to see.
I think that these are really important points. I remember a few years ago when I started to work with machine learning for fraud, I came to some operators, I presented them the concept, and they told me, my expectation is that, I tell you, here is the database, you press the button, your machine learning will detect everything.
No, it doesn't work like that.
Okay, and it's really a very important message, because it doesn't work like that. Machine learning, in my view, and I think that you will agree, Nurlan, it's not magic. It's an excellent tool, but it still needs the expert to work with it, to analyze the results, and to take the benefits from it.
Absolutely, I agree.
Okay, thank you very much for this interesting view of what Rogers is doing with machine learning in fraud, and this is really interesting.
Thank you,
we will
Gadi.
touch later on it in the Q&A part.